Hi, this is Donna for the Custody Project. We are near Atlanta and at the end of our national drive, which has taken about a month. We've gone through from Florida to LA to San Francisco, Chicago, Minneapolis. We've been through Pennsylvania, down through Washington, D.C., through the Carolinas, and now we're in Atlanta. And here and there along the trip, we've done film clips to bring awareness for what our families are going through. The Custody Project helps mothers and children with visitation and custody expenses and some of the complications of the family court system. And during the drive, various questions have come up, and we try to address a topic here and there as we're driving. Many times you'll see me talking by myself, and that can be because the people that are helping me have active cases in front of the courts. And when they do, we have seen through 20 years of doing this that sometimes a judge can be dangerous or retaliatory, and we do not want to endanger these mothers or cause them to lose any contact with their children. At other times, we're doing interviews where the person can talk or sit beside me and we can have a conversation. So I am sure that it's somewhat boring to see my face all the time, but we're going to try and do another set of questions as this is our last interview for this drive.
Okay, Donna, when a mother loses custody of her child or children and they end up in the custody of the abuser, how does she go about getting them back away from the abuser?
Well, there are some difficulties, of course, and there are some tips. Sometimes they never get them back. Sometimes they are able to find enough evidence where they can. A lot of this depends on many players. A lot of times mothers will first, when a child discloses or as a first witness, she will hear a child saying they are being physically or sexually molested, physically abused, they're being treated negligently. It is very common for a mother to run to the police, CPS, family court services, the family law courts to ask for assistance. If you have a good team of people on this case and the documentation is properly submitted and you're in front of a great judge or good judge, there are judges who will look at the evidence and say, you know, even a supervised visitation schedule is inappropriate, and we are going to award sole physical, sole legal to this mother and protect them henceforth. On the opposite side are the cases where the way I have always understood it, the judge chooses to believe that this mother is simply lying and trying to block the contact between the child and the non-custodial parent. And as a reward for this, as to punish this mother and as to a reward, it turns around and gives this very vulnerable child to this parent who has or is abusing this child. Can you stop? So now there is a new requirement, and the new requirement is when you have a child or children in unsafe hands, it almost requires the entire community to be on alert for these children. The mother can no longer be there as the first line of defense, whether she now has absolutely no contact or limited contact or supervised contact or a distance, some type of distance is being imposed where she can no longer act as the first line of response. That means the rest of us are being asked to step up. What does that mean? Sometimes that means that you, as a mother, you might sit down with the teachers and the principals. You may have to bring your court order. You may have to sit down and say, I believe my children are in danger. Here's a copy of my court order, my contact with the children, or my inability to be near them. If you are mandated to report, if you see anything that suggests these children are in danger, please report. And this is the same type of communication that would go throughout the whole community, whether it's the doctors, the nurses, the coaches, the teachers, the counselors, the therapists, the police departments. Oftentimes a mother lives in one jurisdiction, the father lives in another, and you may have to sit down with the police in each jurisdiction to again share that if in any way something were to be observed or these kids were to reach out for help, that there's already a suspicion that they are really and truly in danger. Sometimes you have to communicate with your neighborhood or their neighborhood, wherever the kids are. But it's a boots on the ground type of response. A lot of times, once the courts have decided, we think that you're the problem, we think the mother is the problem, we think the mother is a liar, we think she's trying to block contact, that it's far harder for her, oftentimes, for her to correct that. But if other eyewitnesses throughout the community are stepping forward and saying, independently stating, we see evidence, here's our evidence, that begins to build up an entirely new body of evidence. Sometimes, some mothers, we've been doing this for over 20 years, and we often have heard stories where an abuser also will pay people to remain silent. So this is another thing to face, is if you are an eyewitness to a child in danger, which side of the fence do you want to be on? Do you want to help these children who are in such danger, or, are you going to take a bribe to remain silent? So we've heard so many stories for so long that part of the point of the drive is to voice what these mothers and children cannot voice for themselves. When these children are in danger, if they are not in a safe place, you will often see them withdraw. They are not safe enough to speak for themselves. Sometimes they're isolated, where, for example, they might have had a lot of friends before while they lived with the mother and were under her care. They are now more captives, more prisoners. They are removed from their friends, they're removed from their activities, they're removed from phone or contact, or they're more carefully controlled. And for 20 years or more that we've been in operation, we have heard these patterns being described. They're often, of course, extremely fearful of this person that they've been placed in the hands of. And if you are dealing with evidence that you can bring forward, and you're dealing with a judge who truly can look at the evidence and now step forward to help these children, you may see yourself presenting police reports, neighbors stepping forward to testify, teachers, principals, doctors, nurses, and you have to open it up like that. One of the most difficult situations, it is almost in a way a conspiracy of silence. I hate to say it that way, but if people, a lot of times we hear stories where an abuser will in some way inform the children that this mother does not love them anymore, dump them on their doorstep. Too bad, so sad, but you're just going to have to live here. And this is part of the picture that has to be reversed. These children, a lot of times, think no one cares about them. And that's part of why it's so important for all of us to step forward. Especially when a mother is under an order that she herself is not being permitted to assist in their safety.
Okay, Donna, do you ever see abusers using the custody decision of the courts, granting them custody for their subsequent lies regarding the fitness of the mother to care for the children?
What we've seen, and I have to say, in every one of these clips that we're doing, I am a mother, I am not an attorney, but we have seen patterns, repeating patterns over 20 years of running of our operation through the nonprofit. So what we have often seen is a pattern where when a mother goes to court and says, my child has, my children have said, they are being treated negligently, or they are being physically abused or sexually molested. Again, she comes forward as the first witness in their defense. She is essentially saying that a crime is being committed against her children. She is reporting as an eyewitness. One of the MOs we see over and over is a strategy where, of course, this person accused of this must discredit this witness in any way possible, and often absolutely decimate this mother. So this is required in order to avoid being charged in a criminal court for this behavior towards a youngster or youngsters. So what we see is in family law, there is a threshold anyway in a normal case where it is very important for a custodial parent to show that the definition in my mind of a custodial parent is that they are always protecting the best interests of these children, which means their health, their safety, and their welfare. The other caveat for a custodial parent is they must respect the visitation schedule or the visitation time of the non-custodial parent. The conflict and the difficulty and the way these abuse cases often seem to play out is that you have a mom who is disturbing that paradigm. There is a third factor going on, and when this third factor erupts, the court, at least in my mind, the court, if this man comes forward and says she is lying, she is just trying to interfere with my contact with my children, then that can trigger the court to say, well, we are going to punish by removing custody from her and giving custody to the non-custodial parent, now the new custodial parent. The difficulty is that many times these mothers are stepping forward as the witnesses. The kids are disclosing to whether it's CPS or the police or neighbors, and with as long as there is clear, or the doctors or the nurses or the teachers or the principals, and as long as that clear evidence is brought forward in court and the court sees it and can act on it, I cannot tell you how many times stories come to us where these professional players will somehow label this information as unsubstantiated or at worst case unfounded, and yet the mothers have the evidence that the child did, or children did, disclose to the doctor. The doctor did take a physical exam, so this piece of, I think sometimes mothers are also dealing with attorneys who don't properly bring their cases forward, or she's trying herself to bring this evidence forward, or if you're dealing with corruption in the courts or gender bias, or a judge who is not well trained in domestic violence and abuse issues and doesn't recognize these triggers. But the overall objective to a person who is actually committing a crime is to focus on this mother and in every way possible annihilate her. And what happens is, the other piece of this is that if that step succeeds, some of the next steps are, since she's removed, the community begins to think that, well, the kids don't look as happy with him, but at least he's taking care of them. She doesn't seem interested. So this entire flip-flop occurs. And this dynamic is part of why it's so important for all of us to continue to be alert for these children, because these mothers will continue to try to communicate with whoever they can to say, my children are in danger. Please, as a community, watch for them. Please, if you see something, please report. And as witnesses again step forward, it helps to again put a light on this person who may be an abuser, a perpetrator, but is now in some of these cases, and many of the ones that come to us, is now the custodial parent. The other thing about this situation, another piece of it, is that they often will block, in as many ways as possible, this mother's contact with these children. Now, that is a very odd piece, because if at just the family court level we subtract the the situation of abuse to these children, when the court transfers custody to the other parent and says, you are now the custodial parent, that parent is now required to allow access to the non-custodial parent. And what we often hear in the stories that come to us is that access is denied, or access is deeply controlled. And these mothers have committed no crime. They do not have a history of any violence or any wrongdoing towards their children. So at the level of changing just the custodial roles, there should be frequent and open access to the non-custodial parent, the mother now. The point is that part of the point is, not only are you dealing with a custody issue, not only are you dealing with an abusive issue where the children are at risk, but now you are also, in a way, dealing with what I usually refer to as this 14th century mentality that mothers and children are simply property. And this woman has come forward into a court of law and shamed this man publicly, and she will be punished. So now she is punished on several different levels, and the overarching problem, not only to heal her, but the other overarching problem is to safeguard these children and return them to a safe and loving home.
Donna, it's been a great discussion, but if we were wrapping up now, what would you like to say to mothers out there that are in this situation?
One of the first things to say is, moms, you know what, those of you who are wonderful mothers and who love your children and who have cared for them, but you have been misaligned, and in many times ruined by going through the court procedures and having a terrible situation happen to you. You almost have to walk through burning fire and keep walking until this is resolved. There are other steps that can be taken that were not discussed in this film clip, and we are now concluding the drive. So I will hope for three things. If these drives are a success, it is so important to create a national language to share with throughout our nation, to dialogue and to create strategies that can assist these families and push these issues forward. It is so important to reach out to donors who hear the agonies these families are going through and who will support these issues so that these mothers can get good attorneys, great attorneys, be before wonderful judges who will help them turn these issues around and correct this ship for them. For mothers, you must always listen to that wonderful intuition you have and get the training and the education that you will need to protect these kids when you're working with the courts. I'm sure I could say more, but thank you, all of you, for supporting this drive, all of the people who donated so that this drive could be possible, and I will hope that in one way or another the assistance continues and we all continue to meet under better and better circumstances. Thank